Hi there, I'm Machine Pun Kelly, and welcome to another edition of Debunking MAGA Talking Points. Today I want to talk about the accusations of genocide against white farmers in South Africa after last week's disgraceful performance by Donald Trump in the White House. But first, let's just take a look at that disgraceful performance. Feel free to skip ahead if it's going to make you throw up in your mouth.
A correct and a fair media exposes things, but we have a very corrupt media. They won't even report this. If this were the other way around, it would be the biggest story. Now, I will say apartheid, terrible. That was the biggest story. That was reported all the time. This is sort of the opposite of apartheid. What's happening now is never reported. Nobody knows about it. All we know is we're being inundated with people, with white farmers from South Africa, and it's a big problem. Marco Rubio was telling me he's never seen anything like it. The numbers of people that want to leave South Africa because they feel they're going to be dead very soon.
Now that whole piece of ridiculousness is out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to first look at what genocide is and why it's not happening. Second, we'll look at how this whole false narrative got started. Third, we'll look at why they are spreading these rumors even though they're not true. And finally, you can find links to confirm everything I said in the description box below. Let's start by defining genocide. According to the United Nations Genocide Convention, genocide involves acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. This includes killing, causing serious harm, or creating conditions to destroy the group. It's a serious term, and misusing it can distort the reality of complex issues. So does the situation in South Africa fit this definition? What do the numbers show compared to other instances of contemporary genocide? Let's compare it to Sudan and Gaza, just to get some perspective. The numbers in this chart are for all farmers. A specific breakdown by race is not always available. But even assuming they were all white, which they were not, the numbers pale in comparison. There have only been 250 farmers killed in South Africa over the last 5 years. Compare that with 300,000 deaths in Sudan, or over 50,000 in Gaza, both of which had over 2 million people displaced as well. This elucidates how silly it is to call what is happening in South Africa genocide in any way, and how it belittles actual genocide. Now let's look at the murders of farmers compared to overall numbers in South Africa. Between 2010 and August 2023, South Africa recorded 4,308 farm attacks and 806 farm murders. In that same span, they totaled about 273,000 murders, which means farm murders accounted for 0.3% of total murders. And those numbers are going down. More recently, in the third quarter of 24-25 financial year, the South African Police Service only reported one white farmer killed, with 12 farm murders overall, including farm dwellers, employers, and security guards. And it's not just the official government numbers we need to rely on. In 2023, AfriForum reported 49 total farm murders. The Transvaal Agricultural Union of South Africa recorded 50 in 2023 and a total of 32 in 2024. Once again, these are total numbers, not just white farmers. In fact, over the last 5 years, there have been over 100,000 murders nationwide, with only 250 of them being farmers. When put in perspective the larger picture of violence in South Africa, the notion that there is some sort of genocide of white farmers is just ludicrous. Furthermore, to listen to Trump, you would think this problem is escalating. In reality, the trend is going down. Farm attacks gradually increased from 2010 to 2019, but since then, both attacks and numbers have trended down. But are the numbers accurate? Can we trust them? A group called Antiforum claims the numbers are being lowballed, but a couple of things about that. First, Antiforum is a right-wing, white supremacist organization in spite of their denials. But secondly, we don't just have to blindly accept the government's numbers either. As previously stated in March 2025, SAPS, I don't know who came up with that acronym, but it's not a good acronym, looked into the claims and found only one white farmer was murdered in the third quarter of 2024. Another group, Agra-SA, an organization of South African farmers, has called such claims baseless, arguing South Africa's high crime rate with a 2024 crime index of 75.4 affects all communities, not just farmers. In February of 2025, a South African magistrate dismissed the white genocide narrative as clearly imagined. The South African Human Rights Commission has also found no evidence of systemic racial targeting in farm attacks. In sum, the only groups making claims of white genocide are white supremacists, and they have no substantive evidence. Claims have been reviewed independently by both government and non-government groups, and no one has ever found any substance to any of these charges. And while I'm not excusing murder in any instance, or justifying the violence in South Africa, this is all that it is. Comparing it with genocide is sheer hyperbole. Even the white South African farmers are saying it's not happening. So where did these claims come from then? We have to go back a bit. South Africa's history of apartheid and land dispossession plays a significant role in the farm attack debate. The 1913 Natives Land Act restricted black land ownership. When apartheid ended in 1990, the Afrikaners, or white South Africans, were scared. And you can understand why. After centuries of oppressing and killing black South Africans, the notion of losing power could be frightening. Donald Trump and the other white supremacists like to skip over that part. Around the time apartheid was ending, there was fear-mongering about Satanism and how the blacks were Satanists who were going to kill the whites. They told tropes about child sacrifices and cannibalism and all kinds of evil. But when that didn't happen, the narrative kind of passed away for a bit. What didn't pass was land ownership. While there was a small shift, whites owned the majority of privately owned land in virtually every province and still had most of the land in all but one province by 2016. Then in 2018, a group called the Sudalanders, a white supremacist survivalist group who are preparing for a race war, got it going again. Rupert Murdoch sent Paul Toohey, News Corp Australia's top journalist, to South Africa, where he received a tour by the Sudalanders' ally, AfriFrom. Toohey went home, presented his so-called findings, which were just as hyperbolic and inaccurate as anything else you could expect from Fox News. He spewed his propaganda in Australia, then Fox News picked it up here in the US and parroted it, and then Donald Trump saw that segment and tweeted about it, and then Elon Musk chimed in, and thus fake news about white genocide in South Africa went international. The white supremacists like to pretend they are minority victims of the racist South African government as they cite 142 race laws. But that is wholly and completely disingenuous and a misrepresentation of the reality. That reality is that today, 71% of privately held farmland in South Africa is still owned by whites, who now just make up 8% of the country's population of over 56 million. Another 25% is owned by the government, while blacks, 81% of South Africa's population, only own 4% of the country's rural land. About 55% of South Africans, almost exclusively black, live in extreme poverty. And based on the Gini Index, a measure of wealth inequality, South Africa has the widest wealth gap in the world, with 85% of the wealth being held by whites. The average white has 20 times as much wealth as the average black. In short, the widest wealth gap in the world based on wealth is in South Africa, with whites having the advantage. If there is some kind of reverse apartheid going on with the South African government, they are really bad at it. So what is really happening? To explain, I would like to draw an analogy. Imagine there are two runners of relatively equal ability about to run a 1-mile race. One of them has to run with a 10-pound ankle weight, the other one does not. The runner who doesn't have an ankle weight gets an enormous lead for obvious reasons. Then about 100 yards from finishing, someone stops the race and says, "This isn't fair." So they stop the race. They take the ankle weight off the one runner and resume the race, declaring things are even now. It would be ludicrous to suggest because the last 100 yards were fair, the race was fair. And that's analogous to where we've been in South Africa since the end of apartheid. Just because apartheid ended doesn't mean the benefits of it went away for whites. It's that extreme wealth imbalance that has led squatters to squat on unoccupied white-owned land over the last 2 decades. In January, South Africa passed the 2025 Expropriation Act, which updated the laws for how land could be appropriated. Included in the bill is a nil compensation provision, which allows the government to take land without compensation in rare circumstances, such as when the land is not being utilized. When the Satanist scare happened in 1990, many South African whites fled, leaving their farms abandoned. Squatters have assumed that land. Nil compensation allows for the government to give that unused land to the people who are currently living on it and cultivating it. While the bill hasn't even gone into effect yet, landowners are panicking that the land they are ignoring could be taken away from them and given to people who are actually living on it. They are crying, "This is reverse racism or reverse apartheid." This is akin to the guy who ran without the ankle weight screaming about unfairness if the guy who ran with the ankle weight is given equal position with him on the track. There's a false narrative that merely ending a measure that caused inequality fixes that inequality. The effects of that inequality still remain. Inequality must be reversed for equality to be achieved. In short, reversing apartheid isn't racism. Perpetuating it is. It does show, however, how dishonest the genocide narrative is when they use a law passed in 2025 to explain why murders happened in 1990, even while the actual victims deny that narrative. What about them singing about killing the Boers and all those mass graves? Kill the Boer, also known as Dubo Ibanu, is a controversial South African anti-apartheid song that originated during the struggle against the apartheid regime. It is an anthemic song, not to be taken literally. Boer is symbolic of apartheid. Here is Justin Malema singing it at an Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, rally in South Africa.
Where were you when I'm sick? Where were you when I'm there? So far sketchy, so far sketchy, at 13, Kichima, Cyprian Konto Alliance, shoot to kill, Gamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa, attention.
Saying that it is literally promoting white genocide is like saying that singing the national anthem in America means you promote slavery because it literally mentions slavery. You can't just take the history out of South Africa and the origin of the song. Remember, as many as 2.5 million black South Africans were killed colonizing South Africa. Another 21,000 were killed during apartheid, and more were killed in the first 10 months of 1990 than farmers who have been killed since 1990. And while we call them farmers, the average white farmer is worth over $2.5 million. Farmers makes you think of a dude in overalls out there tilling the field. That's not what's happening here. This is more like plantation owners than farmers. This all ties into the Expropriation Act and the fear-mongering among white supremacists, and the notion that the angry black mob is coming to kill them. But it's all a hyperbolic response to the fact that black South Africans are seeking equality in the most racially disparate nation in the world. There is no evidence that anyone has ever been motivated to kill South African farmers as a result of the song, and it's a bit ridiculous to suggest it is evidence of genocide, especially since there is no genocide. Listen to Malema here as he explains in court what the song means to him.
My Lord, as a younger generation in the struggle, we sing the songs those who came before us sang, to put ourselves in the position they were before. And like we said, our songs are not in any way meant to engage in any literal engagement. They are songs for that purpose of the revolution, not to attack anyone. My Lord, from the times of Shaka Zulu until today, I've never heard that black people were given instruction to attack through song. I'm still to wait for example where the masses of our people were given an instruction through song.
What's actually going on is white supremacists are deliberately misusing the lyrics of the song to make it seem like they are the victims of racism and not the perpetrators of it. And about all those pictures of dead South Africans that Donald Trump showed and all those memorials, some of those dead South Africans Trump showed were actually from Congo. And as for the memorials, they are still using the same math. The number of farmers' kills doesn't change if you represent them with a cross, nor do they become white because you made the crosses white. They still make up for only a fraction of 1% of all murders in South Africa over that time. They still aren't all white, and they still don't qualify as white genocide. They are still just the propaganda of white supremacists. In conclusion, farm attacks and murders in South Africa are a tragic reality, but they do not constitute a genocide against white farmers. The data shows a decline in farm murders over time, while both black and white farmers are effective, and the violence is primarily driven by robbery, not racial motives. South Africa's high crime rate, rooted in extreme poverty and inequality, affects all communities, and addressing it requires comprehensive solutions, like improved policing and land reform. The attempts to improve policy and land reform are falsely being called by Trump and other white supremacists racism. But reversing racism is not reverse racism. And reversing the effect of apartheid is not reverse apartheid, as Trump embarrassingly claimed. By focusing on facts and avoiding sensationalism, we can better understand this complex issue and work toward meaningful change. Once again, I'm Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK, and thanks for watching. I welcome comments from both sides, but I'll ignore the ones that clearly ignore everything that I said in the video. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to click like and subscribe.